Sorry about that. Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are back to another recording of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and Video Game News. Today is Monday, September 26th. Starting a little bit later today, got into, I guess, some programming and went late last night. So much for having like a consistent sleep schedule. Over the weekend, I didn't really do any gameplay, so I think I may have missed some daily logins, some dual spectate lives. Like it really is just asking a lot to log in every day on this game, and that may very well have killed my chances of getting all the way to the top here. Although I was winning fairly well, so I still think I'm in a decent spot to get to at least 11,000, but 22,000 is a little bit more questionable. We have until the 29th, today is the 26th, so we have like 3 days. Outside of that, on the weekend, I actually accomplished a lot more than I thought I would, because I was putting myself at odds that I'd accomplish 2 out of 4 potential goals, and I actually accomplished, I would say 3 goals, maybe even 4, because I finished playing Darksiders 3. Darksiders 3 in particular, it just puts you in this weird position. It's put me in this weird position because, first of all, the game is obviously rushed to be finished. There is no less than 5 minutes of cutscene after cutscene after cutscene. The final boss with one bad guy is right after the final boss of another bad guy. There's just no open world element of what the rest of the game was offering. So normally you would have to go through these odd open world kind of dungeon-like environments, and then get outside of that environment to, or well, you kind of just curl around the environments is the best way to describe it, because the entire level design is just awkwardly crisscrossed in a few places, but mostly just absolutely curving around in circles in a lot of other places. So like there really are just no straight pathways, and there really should be straight pathways, because if you were to compare it to Darksiders 1, where you would get into a church-like temple, each room would be very much like that first Zelda, in which there was a square room next to a square room next to a square room, and there might be doors that are locked, and you might go through one room to another, which would be curving around, but there's no actual curves of it. And for the most part, even when you had crisscrossing in the first game, and in most games, it's really extremely linear. There are no branches and no other ways to go. Whereas in Darksiders 3, the entire overworld has all these weird, like, interconnecting shortcuts that you would never really use. Not unless they did something incredibly annoying, like force you to go back to the central point, which is called Haven. Like, if you were forced to go to Haven after you beat each of the 7 deadly sins, and then you had to start from that point and start going in a different direction, the game would have felt fairly different, but it would have also felt fairly repetitive on that concept. But you're just not forced to do that. You have fast travel, which can help you, and actually, after beating the second to last deadly sin, Wrath, there's kind of no way to get from Wrath's domain back to the center of the map, like, it's a one-way ticket as far as I could tell. And so I did just have to fast travel to leave it. Also, at the end of the fight with Wrath, you are at the top of a tower, and they don't even want to bother to show you an elevator, so you just fall out of the... You just spawned a couple of feet out of the air in a lower place, and you're just magically transported in a way that is just not animated. They definitely tried to hide the fact that the game was unfinished till the very end. They also pretty much hid the fact that Darksiders 3 is effectively a prequel to a prequel to a prequel, because as far as I can tell, the events of Darksiders 3 happened first, then Darksiders 2 potentially, and then Darksiders 1, which kind of makes sense, but it doesn't fully get explained. They might as well have done a flash forward at the beginning of the game and just shown the events of Darksider 1, or a flash forward at the very end of the game showing the events at the end of Darksiders 1. But the weirdest part about it, since I didn't really enjoy the game, like, it's just not polished well enough. I think at a certain level you probably would have wanted to just get rid of a lot of the environment stuff and leave a significant amount of the game on the cutting room floor, to instead make it a linear dungeon God of War type game. And I mean the original God of War series, where you're just going through unimaginative areas, dungeons, and just fighting people over and over again, because that's effectively what you're doing anyways. But there aren't enough big boss fights, really, because it would just be the 7 deadly sins. They never really give you a list of the 7 deadly sins, and so it's kind of confusing as to who you're chasing after at any one point. It doesn't really tell you. There, as far as I can tell, is no indicator of where collectibles are, so that the right way to really play the game would be to have a walkthrough guide that would let you run around and collect all the collectible pickups as quickly and easily as possible, because I would say there's probably at least 15% of that game that I didn't see, because they're just areas you would never really choose to go back to once you had the accessibility movement tech to actually reach that area. But what puts... So normally I would say I am just totally done with Darksiders 3, and I am totally done with Darksiders 3. But what really kicks you in the gut is that once you beat the game the first time, you're playing then a new game plus called Apocalypse 1, and at that point you start to pick up, just like immediately, just playing around with it for a few minutes, you start to get a completely different type of pickup that you just seemingly cannot get at all on the first playthrough, that will raise your armor stats. Which inherently you would have to do it, because the numbers are just going to keep going up and up and up, much like Darksiders 2, and that was the thing that people really didn't like about Darksiders 2, is that it was trying to become like this MMO where the levels can just keep on going higher and higher. And the actual weapons don't matter, because you're just upgrading the weapons. And it definitely gets away from something like Ocarina of Time, where the bow is the bow is the bow, and if you get a better bow, a master bow, then that's a completely separate item. Or you start off with a little sword, and then you eventually get the master sword in Ocarina of Time. Or you get a small bomb bag and a big bomb bag, but that's it. There's no point in Ocarina of Time where you do a new game plus, and then there's a bigger bomb bag and a biggest bomb bag, or there's no super master sword or super duper master sword, and it's not just a plus 10 to attack. I dumped almost all of my upgrades into doing physical damage because for them almost always I was only pressing the X button because the Y strong attacks were always too slow. Like, you could pretty much never use them. Not against bosses, not against medium-sized enemies, not against small-sized enemies. The attack, the wind-up animation on it is just too slow. So it kind of just didn't get polished out there. I will also, tinfoil hat here, put out the theory that it seems like the people that probably worked on Darksiders 3 and worked at THQ had their names removed from the credits, because those credits are way too short for Gunfire Games to really have listed everybody on their team, and for THQ to have also worked on it. The credits are just too short in general, and that definitely happens as people just don't get credited unless they are working with the company that actually eventually publishes it. Remember, Darksiders 3 was supposed to be the big AAA breakout hit for THQ Nordic before Embracer Group even became a thing, and they really half-assed it. But yeah, the only thing I could recommend is use a walkthrough to play Darksiders 3. Play it on the easiest mode first, and probably play it on story mode even in Apocalypse 1, but maybe you could go up to balance mode on the second playthrough. But then try to rush through the game as much as possible if you are going to experience it. In a lot of ways it feels like it wants to be like Diablo 1, where back in the day there just wasn't that much choice, and if you're playing on PC and Diablo there really wasn't any comparison. This is a problem even with Diablo later games, is that people assume you're going to just play it over and over again when there's not really a need for that these days. Even when you get to things like Dying Light 1 as probably the last game that actually was so popular people played it over and over again. I imagine there aren't too many other games like that. The RPG element ideas are causing games to assume that people want to play them that much when they really just don't want to. Also, the game hour idea is kind of out the window at this point. I just don't think anybody is really going to care about selling a game just because it has potentially 300 game hours if you play it over and over and over again. And on top of having this slight twinge to want to play more Darksiders 3 when I have to draw a line on the sand and just say no, there is the also side game that is not Darksiders 4 that they put out, that is the top-down twin-stick shooter starring Strife, the fourth Horseman. They got rid of Pestilence. So I kind of have to play that game, and I'm just hoping that maybe it really is just a case that Darksiders 3 got caught in a development hell, really not of its own making, and as such it shouldn't hold all the blame. I mean, it's still going to hold a lot of blame, though. But maybe Diablo 4 would be better. I would like to see Darksiders 4 be better. I would have liked to see the Diablo series better too. Um, let's see. Now, do we have anything we would like to resummon? I mean, we could bring this guy back, I think. I don't think that quite gets me a one-turn victory, but gets me close, to say the least. Of course, I've played all my cards. It's not like this deck has spell cards that would do 700 damage. But yeah, so there's this whole second sides Darksiders game I need to eventually play. And I have a lot of hope that Darksiders 4 comes out and kind of finishes the story. In a funny way, just seeing all those cutscenes in a row really, I think, highlights an idea around maybe they should have just made a movie around the Darksiders story. Because the story itself is not terrible, particularly if you're squeezing a quadrilogy worth of games down into a single movie, or possibly 2 or 3 direct to DVD, direct to streaming things. Like, I could definitely see them trying to sell the movie rights at some point. But yeah, it's not the best. It's really not the best of experiences. And it kind of sucks that we really are getting dangerously close to the point where it's saying the thing is saying that we should that you should enjoy Darksiders 1, then you should rush to Darksiders 2 and 3. And the side game. And it does, funnily enough, create this weird situation where you are I didn't realize I was going to do damage to him. Yeah. The wiser story would probably be to, if you were just getting into Darksiders 1, play Darksiders 1, enjoy it, and then skip Darksiders 2, 3, and the side game, and maybe play 4. Like, then yeah, I am saying that it probably will sell some kind of animated movie rights, or doing a live action Darksiders series would almost certainly look terrible. And the story isn't that amazing. It is in line with like the Diablo story, that if you took all the bits of back narrative in Diablo 1, 2, 3, and 4, if you squished that all down into an animated movie, you would have about the same experience. And we're going to start seeing that be the case for a lot of games, is that if you squish a narrative of long-running series down, you will have enough of a plot to make a movie. And if the games themselves aren't really offering you enough interaction to make it obvious that it is better as a video game, the God of War reboot series in a lot of ways is kind of dangerously close to that point also, where if they were going to make an animated God of War Ragnarok, and whatever the third game in a potential reboot trilogy would be, if they were to turn that into an animated movie and tell you the same story, I think a lot of people would like that. Particularly mainstream video game journalists would love that, because then it lets them continuously blur the lines between interactive medium and not interactive medium, and hide the fact that many mainstream video game journalists don't beat games all the way to the end. And that in this case, I don't really know if I would claim I beat Darksiders 3 to the end. I saw the credits, I beat the whole story, yes, but when you build a game that is designed to be played multiple times, you probably do have to play it all the way through Apocalypse 1 and Apocalypse 2 and Apocalypse 3. And maybe those numbers just keep on going up. I would suspect they do. So yeah, in a weird position there. And I oddly kind of want more action, but I need to jump in and play Breath of the Wild, which I didn't do any of that this weekend. That was the one thing of the 4 potential things I didn't work on. So I'll probably get similar gameplay experiences. That way. And I need to move over, particularly now that I am really only recording one game to air at a time and filling up the time slots with daily YouTube shorts otherwise, which there's definitely, I think, room for improvement on that system. YouTube shorts, I think I could be a little bit more critical on, or I could be a little bit different on it. I think what I'm going to potentially start thinking about doing is doing a little bit more work on it and sorting it between things that are in early access and things that are not. I don't know if that really is the smartest move, and that would just be more work. That's not what I should have done. I should have summoned this. I already had. Oh no, these are different cards. But yeah, if I was to put the early access things further out, that might make some sense. Or if I was to put the things that are very noticeably like AAA games that people really are going to care about and make special exceptions to double up on the YouTube daily shorts there, that would make some sense. But all of that is just more work, and the smarter move would be to just continue forward making pre-recorded content and try to get to October of 2023 as quickly as possible. Or yeah, that's about what I'd like to do. And then potentially starting around October 2023 or even January 2024, jump back and start scheduling double things. So then there would be like a YouTube daily short, video game daily, PC game daily short, and then a pre-recorded footage, and back to a second pre-recorded footage, but starting in 2024, so there would just be more of a buffer there. Okay. Let's do this first. See what happens when this gets banished. Get a token. Let's activate this guy's effect and see what this does. special summon this guy, I guess. See what we can do now. I don't know if there really is a lot of value in I don't know if there really is a lot of value in putting things in the extra monster zone with this kind of deck. And I do feel like this Called by the Grave probably is to destroy things in your own deck more than destroying something in their deck. Alright. For the rest of the accountability section, I'm continuously working on my guest Wi-Fi, Raspberry Pi guest Wi-Fi router with ad blocking and like virus blocking and adult content blocking, at least for some connections. And yeah, I made some decent progress there, getting the secure FTP set up and the Samba file sharing, network file sharing set up. But a lot of it was just like some really in-depth, hardcore debugging. So there's not really a lot to say. The problem is there is a system that I'm using to mount USB drive sticks, or USB hard drives ideally, and it's just doing a bunch of setup and stuff. And every time this script doesn't work, you're not really getting any feedback, so you kind of have to just assume that if there is a problem, it's because the script isn't working, and as such, you just have to kind of try and figure out what new line, because every time I add a single sentence or a new line of code, that's when it stops working. And usually when you're programming in a certain burst of lines of code. So yeah, you can't just do one at a time particularly easily, even though that's really what you have to do. I've been watching a lot of Archer on Hulu also, and then watching season 2 of Drama World after watching season 1 of Drama World, which is actually a lot easier than you'd think, because the episodes in season 1 of Drama World are only like 15 minutes long, and it definitely feels like it was some kind of online thing before something like Quibi would have existed. The problem though, inherently with season 2 of Drama World, more than anything else, is that the main actress, who is this cute, skinny, red-haired, freckle-faced white girl sucked into a Korean drama, well, several years later, probably in part due to the pandemic, she has now bloated up, and she is just way bigger than you would expect any character to be shown in Hollywood. It's not just, oh, she got a little bit fat. It's like, no, she got at least 80, 90 pounds worth of fat, it looks like, on her. Her entire face is bloated and fat. Her arms are fat. It's not just a fat suit or anything. It is real fat. And I don't want to go all fat people hate or anything like that. I'm not like that, but Hollywood has just trained us as a society to expect to see these anorexic, super skinny characters, and that is just not what what I am seeing with this character. And it's not just her, all the other characters, because there's seemingly 4 or 5 years in between the first season and the second season, that all the other characters look different also. They just can't match. And if anything, that's an interesting point to show, where so many people, including myself, would really love to have a lot of shows come back and do another season, but the characters and the actors would look so different that it just wouldn't work. And that's why I imagine a lot of these things fall apart as far as continuations. They often try to do like soft reboots and such. For live action shows, even if you wait over a certain point where they transition from like standard definition to high definition, everybody would just look completely different anyways. I guess the most notable example of that is I theoretically would love for there to be a Buffy the Vampire Hunter continuation with just all the same actors and all the same characters, but yeah, that wouldn't work really. Dawn, the little girl, the little sister, for instance, would totally, I don't think her name was Dawn actually, the little girl sister of Buffy, she would not still look like a little girl at the very least. And Buffy probably would not look like a young adult teenager, more than likely also. Let's try something here. Oh, that actually only let me banish cards from the opponent's deck, so no, you can't activate your own traps that way, can you? But yeah, it would make a lot more sense to take what happened in the Buffy the Vampire comic book series that continued the story, take the good parts of that comic series, if there is any good arcs or good narratives there, and take the good parts of the original Buffy the Vampire TV series and just do a full-on reboot, like new characters. Of course, that doesn't really work with like Charmed in the CW, which doesn't ever have the budget and has never been profitable. Like it would have to be a major player, and we're not really seeing major players actually caring about making too much new content. Netflix did have this event that they really didn't advertise until it just happened, something called like Tundum or something, TUNDUM. But what effectively it was a major event in which they just flooded YouTube with trailers of new shows, and it made, I suppose, a bunch of announcements of new shows. Like Hellbound Season 2 was one of the shows that, like, I like Hellbound 1 as this weird Korean fantasy story, but also I wouldn't recommend watching it because it just kind of ended on a cliffhanger, and a lot of streaming shows end on cliffhangers like that. But they announced a decent amount of new stuff. Enola Holmes too, the female Sherlock Holmes concept, or the sister of Sherlock Holmes. Can't really remember anything else, but I do know there was quite a lot being shown there. But yeah, contrast Netflix announcing a bunch of new stuff. Alice in Borderland Season 2. That's another one. contrast that with what Amazon Prime is doing, which video game related, and Amazon is going to try to have a 2-day Prime Day a second time in October, or perhaps even a third time. I wouldn't be surprised if the goal here is to have a sale in October and November and potentially even December. But this 2-day sale may also be very limited to just buying Amazon's Kindles and things like that Amazon makes directly. Whereas Prime Video is falling apart. Twitch is falling apart too, but I can't fully blame that on Amazon, because Twitch was pretty much falling apart before it was even acquired by Amazon. But the Prime Video has become a major bait and switch event where very little is available for free without ads on Prime Video now, as they are shifting everything to this other service that Prime owns called Freevee, which is ad laden. So like watching Drama World Season 2, you're watching these streaming ads, and it's just back to regular old TV where you're watching commercials, only worse now because it's the same Geico commercials over and over again, even more than you would see on TV. There are no local ads, and there's very little variety in the ads. And that's not even getting into the problems of so many other streaming services still existing. I must have the Hulu Plus thing because I don't see ads on Hulu. So, and I think you would see ads on Hulu otherwise. Hulu is good, I would say. If... Darn it, that was a waste to do that. Hulu is good if you want to watch old shows and reruns of old shows. And you want to get some of the extended cable stuff without really getting some of the basic over-the-air channels. Sadly, there's just no real good solution for everything. But I'm supposed to be talking about video games. But yeah, I was fairly productive this week. I baked a cake, which just having the extra time to do that. I had to reset a phone, and I hope I reset the phone correctly. Yeah. But I need to move on as far as video game news, so I think I'll stop there. I think I'm potentially leaning towards maybe moving away from Samsung phones, even though the Samsung Smart Switch is nice, and considering going to like a pure Apple experience. But I don't know if there's really that much of a difference one way or the other. But this phone I had to reset was showing bugs of the Samsung One UI crashing, which would cause the entire phone to crash and the lock screen to crash. And so I erased it and then restored it, and I'm hoping whatever bug was in it didn't just get restored from the backups, both from Google, because the Google Restore installs your apps but kind of doesn't move the data back on there, and there is an inconsistency problem there in general, where you would want to be able to restore everything and have all the settings and all the credentials, your two-factor authenticator stuff. I forgot to transfer that over, so I lost at least one two-factor authenticator login. which that sucks. But yeah. But yeah, also I would say the Chrome password filling in feature is nice, but it's not universal in apps and things. Which I'd like it to be more universal in apps. So you could just get all your passwords in Chrome, although at some point you're talking Chrome on a cell phone more than Chrome on a PC. I'm still seeing a lot of people saying they're leaving Chrome because Chrome is going to block ad blockers, and yeah, I think I'm going to probably be blindsided by that if that does actually happen. I'm putting my guess into the thought that they're not actually going to do it, or that the implementation of it is only going to block. Well, even if it blocks uBlock Origin, that's unacceptable. But yeah, that may be a nightmare scenario that happens where all of a sudden I have to try and move my macros over. Although it may not be that big of a deal. Sniper Rangers on the chat says, "Oh, sold, wait." It's like, nope, we're still just playing the same festival. This is the loner deck. Yep. There's really no way I would be playing Soul Sword at all, because I don't have the crafting points, and I'm not going to get the crafting points. The one thing I'm not going to do is spend real world money on this game, so there's no way I would get enough crystals to buy enough cards to get duplicates to craft Soul Sword or any other meta deck that I don't have. I only have the Flouderies deck that Sniper Ranger helped me build, and the Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck that I built before then. That's the only two decks I can have pretty much at this point. Like, until the meta changes and perhaps cards that I already own start to have some value. I suppose it is possible that something could change in the meta, or I could get a pre-built structured deck that is reasonable to play, and just but outside of that, I am stuck in stone until the meta changes or they give us a ridiculous amount of cards, which we're probably around the 7 or 8 month point with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters. If they wanted to do like a 1 year anniversary or a 10-month anniversary event and just say we're going to give away a ton of decks or a ton of cards or something, then that might change something. When you look at like some of the gacha games that get crazy, and they say we're gonna give you 1,000 credits, 1,000 gems, or we're gonna give you one special character, and the kind of crazy ads you might see for mobile games, if Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master went in that direction and became very, very generous, that would be nice. It's not very generous, and I don't expect Bandai to be or Konami, I forget which one it is. I don't expect the makers of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master to be generous in any way. Sniper Ranger said earlier, yellow Rydo, and he's now said, sticks and stones may break your bones, but the meta will always hurt you. Yeah, that's probably true. Let's go through the video game news. The game with stolen art, I'm practically advertising it at this point, is still on Steam, just for this investigative journalism, small bit of investigative journalism I'm doing here. But so the game being flagged, the creators of the content that is stolen being notified, still does not seem like it has done anything, which maybe implies that if you do a DMCA request, DMCA takedown, which I would assume they have done, that Valve is willing to either fight that in court, or they've been legally indemnified, and the creator of the game has said, nope, we will pay for any legal fees Valve has to pay for, which that would be crazy for Valve to even believe that a game developer would have the money to pay for legal fees if they got sued. As far as a safe haven law and being indemnified, well, not being indemnified, as far as being a safe haven, which you'd think Steam was, as soon as they got that DMCA, they would have to take it down immediately. Like, so that's the actual implementation of the DMCA. YouTube doesn't really implement the DMCA, they implement a somewhat modified things with its content ID system, which is not the legal DMCA, whereas I don't think Steam or Valve has anything like that. But as far as news that I actually know, we have a GameDeveloper.com article here saying that Take This was among the recipients of a $700,000 anti-extremist grant from the Department of Homeland Security. The recent grant was issued by the DHS, will allow researchers to develop resources to monitor extremist groups and create workshops to prevent those groups from spreading. Why would a video game company be getting this grant money? Well, I would assume you can take one of two thoughts. One is that there is actually extremists in the games being made by Take This, which at a certain level, yes, there are extremists that play video games, although I wouldn't say probably that high of a number compared to extremists that go to, say, football games, baseball games, church, just attend your average life of events, movies. Extremists are going to do normal human things. They're not monsters that likely spend every single second of every single day just doing their extremist thing. Although at a certain level, I would also argue the opposite, that extremists probably do spend more time doing extremist things than anyone else who don't do any extremist things, so they probably have less time to play video games. So that would be your general thought as to why this gets the grant. You could also go tinfoil hat conspiracy theory and say that Take This is doing some form of spying, or has done some form of spying for the Department of Homeland Security, and this is effectively a bribe being hidden as a grant giveaway. Although at a certain level it could also be a third thing, and this is probably the most realistic thought. It could just simply be that they had money, government money, to give away, and so they gave away government money. And that is all there really is to say about that, is that the grant system just allowed for it, the money had to go to somebody. Of course, without bothering to actually read GameDeveloper.com, who often has their own agenda and propaganda that they put out here, their narrative is to say white nationalists have always been has always had an extremist problem, or games have always had an extremist problem. That's pretty crazy, though. That's insane to say that Pong, the first video game, had an extremist problem, or Pac-Man had an extremist problem. And like, honestly, the arcade was kind of one of the few places where you could have people of different creeds, races, and colors come together and play games. Even before arcade games were really the thing, like pool halls and pinball halls and things like that. Darn it. That was a mistake. Well, this might work. So yeah, it's stupid and inaccurate to say games have always had an extremist problem. You, at best, have to go back to something like online gaming in particular, which is somewhere around the 4th or 5th generation of games, if however you want to count the generations, before people could have even communicated with each other. So Halo 1 and those types of experiences, like possibly that could have been could have been in a... Seriously? I had to pick every single card. But yeah, if you said online gameplay had an extremist problem, maybe then you'd be close to saying something realistic, but it's not really the case either. Like, some of these articles definitely come from a perspective that people just didn't live through these times, particularly when it's video game journalism, where video games have happened in the lifetime of people who can remember the actual past and can't be gaslit into believing straight out lies. But yeah, it's just not possible. It's not logically possible to say games have always had an extremist problem. If they want to say yes, white nationalism seems to have become more visible and more prevalent and more involved in spouting nonsense in video games in the past 10 years, that's okay. That's something I could believe. But I would definitely say it's probably just more prevalent because more people are online. These thoughts and like white nationalists have existed for a long time, but they haven't been able to talk outside of small groups of people and small meetings. The truth is the KKK never has gone away, and those feelings have never gone away, and they pretty much won't ever go away. There will always be some small sect of people who teach it to their kids and their kids embrace those things, or people who are just disenfranchised and are easy to be recruited into that way of thinking. And it's just not something that you're going to ever completely eliminate. It's pretty much impossible to kill an idea, regardless of how bad that idea is. But to try and say that video games are the battlefield in which this this conflict of ideas should happen is ridiculous. And yeah, I really do have to just boil down to like these slacktivists that these SJWs. I constantly have to use those phrases. They need to get out of the video game field where they think they can push kids around and push people around and create this ideal paradise of censorship that they want to create. And they need to really go fight what they claim they're fighting for against people that actually in a different field where it would actually matter. By far, white nationalism and extremism in general should be fought in the halls of political corridors amongst politicians and people with actual power. It should be fought when people are actually breaking the laws, although I'm not sure I really agree with the idea of extrajudicial punishment for things being labeled a hate crime versus just punishing everyone equally for committing crimes, because it's hard to prove whether it was in the heart of somebody, whether it was hateful or not. But yeah, it should be fought in the hearts and minds of people in their actual actions, in their actual words, not with something that they're expressing in a virtual reality. Like, there's plenty of people that I imagine once or twice have played a fascist / Nazi-like character in a video game. Like, that this is the same argument that, oh, I want to play this World War II game, but I don't want to play as a Nazi character. It's like, no, you kind of agreed to that, and it's okay to do that and express that in an imaginary, safe environment, and just experience that entertainment from that perspective. Plenty of people have played Judas in passion plays. Like, Judas, theoretically, amongst Christianity, one of the worst characters, just like below the devil, as far as the list of bad guys in the Bible, and Peter denying Jesus would, I guess, probably be about the third worst in the Christian Bible. But nobody complains about there being anti-Christians who are invading passion plays and playing Judas, or that the actors who play Judas in passion plays are actually anti-Christians. That would be ridiculous. And yet that is the exact argument that is made over and over again, to the point where we have gotten to this ridiculous level where the US government has been manipulated, seemingly, into giving grant money to a company. So people's tax dollars in the United States have effectively been wasted by giving grant money to a video game company to fight online extremism, whether it is an actual problem or not, or whether it even exists or not. And I'll leave it at that, because that's a pretty big rant. And yeah, I definitely hate that I keep hitting the same topics over and over again. It's not super surprising to me that people eventually get bored of my channel and stop watching, or they only watch one video and then they move on. But yeah, it sadly is the same topics over and over again, or you just talk about nothing. And these topics do need to come up, and I would hope that eventually some people would be hearing this for the first time. Yeah, I imagine a lot of parents and grandmas don't realize that there is this whole culture war that's trying to be fought amongst video games, and they are trying to use your children as cannon fodder in a culture war. And then you have sponsored content that are basically ads from GameDeveloper.com here, which I really shouldn't probably cover at all. But NVIDIA announced their 4000 series, 40 series, RTX 40 series GPUs, and everybody hated it because it was like the lower end 40 series GPU really isn't a 40 series GPU by most people's opinion, and is actually kind of a bait and switch product, and the price is ridiculously high. So much so that there is speculation that they really don't have any 40,000 series that they want to sell, and instead this is more of a concept around selling the glut of 30,000 series GPUs because of all of the the Bitcoin miners not being able to use GPUs anymore, and so the market is flooded with used GPUs that you probably shouldn't buy because they're probably going to be burnt out, and also, like, I imagine there's a lot of GPUs that might be on shelves that they're trying to sell from the 30,000 series. But yeah, they definitely did announce new things. And that's something every new NVIDIA graphics card does, is it announces new features, and then you have to ask yourself, are these new features really just feature creep, or are they things that are going to really be useful for a lot of games, or are they only going to be useful for a small handful of AAA games? And right now, particularly for AAA games, it is the worst argument we've probably ever had as far as buying a new graphics card for new features for AAA games. Like, when the RTX series first came out and they started doing ray tracing, and that was a big advertisement, at least you had like Control and a few other games. There probably is less than 100 games right now that actually implement ray tracing in any kind of appreciable way. So we're talking about the 30,000 series, and I believe the 20 series started the ray tracing. So you're talking 1 or 2 generations behind, and that's for about 100 AAA games. So anything new here, particularly as we're seeing fewer and fewer AAA games getting made and released because of the pandemic and just because they've been very slow, I wouldn't really expect much. Unfortunately, on the other hand, the AMD newest processor was also announced, and just before I started streaming it was announced, and the reviews on that are not sounding particularly great either. Like, the new AMD Athlon processors are going to have some kind of low-level graphics card in them that'll let you do something while your actual graphics card maybe is getting sent in for a replacement, but it really wouldn't be useful to build this new a new computer and have no graphics card in there. I think by default all CPUs should have a built-in graphics card of some sort. You should be able to play things at 1080p 30 minimum, 1080p 60 ideally, with a built-in graphics card, with game settings turned down to medium or even low at those resolutions. And that opens up the door potentially for building this new AMD computer and then buying a new graphics card a year later to upgrade, to do a mid-tier upgrade at that point. But the problem with that idea right now is that you're moving also to the DDR5 RAM, which I think is pretty much a requirement, although maybe it isn't. And so by moving up to DDR5 RAM, you're doubling the price of the RAM you're buying when building a new computer at the moment. And the performance isn't, I think, as good as it really should be from the review I saw for the new Anthlons. Which, knowing nothing else, before any announcements or reviews came out, it was fairly obvious that as far as PC gaming, you probably shouldn't get the first generation of a new generation of a CPU ever. You shouldn't get the first generation 40 series graphics cards. You shouldn't get the first generation the first generation AMD CPU. So like right now is probably the worst time to think about building anything new. That being said, right now might be the beginning of the best time to buy something old. Go back a previous generation for the AMD CPU. Go back a generation to a 2080 or 3080 graphics card, and go back a generation on DDR4 RAM, and you're in a pretty nice spot. Unfortunately, there's nothing to say that I've seen as far as Intel and their integrated graphics. So I don't think I can make a recommendation around building an Intel CPU. There is another argument certainly to be made around the idea of a docked Steam Deck if you don't care about Windows, which moving over to Windows 11 is going to be a big change. Now really isn't the time to stick with Windows if you've never used it before, or go to Windows if you've never used it before. Moving over to Windows 11 is so yeah, Steam Deck in a docked mode would give you an Arch Linux based Linux desktop, which you can do programming in that, you can do office work in that, you can do web browsing in that. You plug in into the dock, you plug in a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, everything works. Then you can take the Steam Deck to go with you. And the Steam Deck, if you get that mid-tier Steam Deck, you're talking $650 plus buying a monitor, a mouse, and keyboard. You're talking about $750, whereas you'd be probably paying somewhere close to $899 for a laptop to compare that to. I don't think that as many people need movability as they think they do. So having a laptop or a Steam Deck so you can move it around between home and office or home and school is kind of not a good idea, because with that movability you also get increased chances of being robbed and getting your equipment stolen, and this is expensive stuff that does get stolen fairly often. So yeah, a desktop probably is your right choice. It will be way cheaper to build a desktop than anything else, but so many people want that portability, and at least with the Steam Deck docked idea, the portability has more of a value. It feels like a Switch. You play it like a Switch. It is focused around gaming, so it has that extra input. You're not running into the balancing it on the knee problem, where many laptops actually cannot be balanced on your lap. Or so you just have to find a desk anyways for a laptop. I don't know if the Steam Deck actually has a Kensington keyhole where you can lock it down with the laptop Kensington locks, but it definitely should have something like that. Um, but yeah, I definitely would say if you're a parent and you don't want to buy a Switch or a gaming PC and a laptop, and you wanted to try to combine some of that down into one device, you should consider looking at the Steam Deck bit in docked mode. Plus, the Steam Deck in docked mode keeps a lot of its Linux versions of stuff locked down and uses the flat pack installation architecture, which means that there's less of a chance of the operating system being corrupted or broken, and more of a chance of recovering it if it is broken, because only the home directory is accessible and writable at all in the Steam OS, and everything you install is installed into what is like your My Documents folder in Windows, which means if you copied your home directory over to a different Steam Deck, everything should be installed and all the settings should be the same. Of course, there is also the Mac option, and if you're just obsessed about Macintosh products, then you're going to just end up buying a MacBook and a tablet and a Mac computer over and over again, so there's really no accounting for that. Like, I doubt I could convince anybody who's obsessed with Mac software to stop being obsessed with Mac software. But yeah, the only other laptop I could possibly recommend if you're looking for a laptop is maybe consider the Framework laptop, because the Framework laptop maybe has a chance in the future of being upgradable, and at least a little bit more repairable. So it doesn't give you a laptop that has everything glued down and has no extra RAM slots and isn't really going to be that serviceable or upgradable in the future. Very few people, I imagine, care about what the screen or keyboard's layouts on the laptop look like. So if you could take out the motherboard in the Framework laptop, which you can, and put in a new motherboard in a couple years, that ideally might save you a little bit of money, although no guarantee. YouTube wants to talk about pop culture, so the YouTube advertisers have made this kind of cringy vertical website, and apparently you have to sign in to continue. Interesting. I don't know why, but yeah. Odd to make a website that is vertical like that and has like a share button and everything. But then, yeah, the YouTube advertisers, YouTube advertisers really are just this whole different breed of people that are not, I think, very connected to what YouTube creators are thinking. And arguably that's a bad way to run your business, that YouTube's creators and every team should probably have a team meeting and interdepartment team meetings where everybody's on the same page and everybody understands each other a little bit better. And I don't think any of that happens. But like, again, can't say YouTube is worse than Twitch. Here we have a Bloomberg article saying that Twitch's creator chief has exited with the controversy over the streamer pay swirling. I've heard people claim that the new split has basically been the split for most Twitch streamers, and they're just now canonizing it. Like the 50-50 split, I think that they advertised in the past, I think, was always only really available to a very small group of streamers, and now they are forcing their top streamers to get to a 7:30 split. And in general, Twitch making more money doesn't promise to fix Twitch in any way. ScumVM is continuing to work on new games. So the Pink Panther Passport to Peril and the Pink Panther Hocus Pocus are ready for their testing period. So 2 Pink Panther games, as ScumVM is emulating more and more games that I do not believe are actually Scum games. At a certain point, they should consider double branding themselves. They probably don't want to do something like that because it would just cause confusion, and it's not like ScumVM has a bad name or bad credibility around its name. But it is, with every year, getting increasingly silly that ScumVM is called ScumVM, and it's now just emulating basically any game at all of a certain age. See, I need to hurry up through the news in general, and I also need to end the turn. Alright, well, let's start going through the actual articles, because those were just kind of the standout articles. I imagine Video Games Chronicles has just a couple flagged articles, and that they may be getting worse and worse about actually flagging articles so that they stay at the top, because I feel like this Call of Duty Modern Warfare beta update, this may have been something we talked about, but maybe not. It's made targets easier to spot, so if you care about Call of Duty Modern Warfare's beta, check that out. UK police arrested the 17-year-old who reportedly linked to the Rockstar security breach, and I believe have charged him at this point. It definitely comes off like, yeah, shouldn't hack things in general, but if you are going to hack things, you probably need to be in a country that would not extradite you or in any way. Yeah, this was a mistake to activate that. Support the prosecution of you. Which is to say, if you're going to hack, you better be hacking out of North Korea or China or Russia, someplace that is going to not care about that at all and protect you. And even at that, there's a lot of danger in becoming a political football that they would be willing to trade as a political hostage or do a prisoner exchange on. And certainly this hacker didn't really get anything. I don't think he had a plan or thought about it, and he definitely didn't have the connections, I think, necessary to implement the plan. You're not going to hack somebody and release data on somebody and then convince them to pay you to not release more data. That's something you do out of spite after the fact when negotiation has fully broken down, which it's possible that he stole this information a long time ago and has been trying to negotiate for a kind of ransom, but it kind of feels like this kid was just an idiot. And that is a problem, certainly, is that we do have just idiot kids, and kids are more empowered now than ever as far as hacking. Although, in all fairness, a 17-year-old 100 years ago could easily have murdered somebody or lynched somebody. And so empowered is only really in the form of hacking. Guns have existed for a long time. Swords have existed for a long time. You have a fairly great equalizer amongst guns and swords and weapons, much more than even in hacking. And yeah, you can't baby-proof a world around 17-year-olds. There are just going to be idiot 17-year-olds that do things. Now, arguably, if you're going to make that argument, you do definitely have 17-year-olds in the United States that are doing school shootings, where the 17-year-old in the UK could only have gone on a knifing spree because he wouldn't have been able to get his hands on a gun because of their restrictive, less freedom-based rules around guns. And so then he ends up hacking, which is the least damaging thing. And I doubt it's going to be like, I think his name is Kevin Mitnick, which was the little kid that hacked. They kind of tell his story as the main character in that movie Hackers. But yeah, there was this fairly young kid that hacked something but barely did any hacking, and the judge threw the book at him and said he couldn't touch computers for like the rest of his life or something. Some kind of ridiculously cruel and unusual punishment. But that was kind of because he was the first hacker, and the judge didn't even know what the prosecution was saying was a lie, because they were claiming that he could shoot off like nuclear missiles because of his hacking, which is just not likely to be true. So I imagine this kid will get arrested. He'll get put on probation for a long time. His identity will probably be hidden because it's the UK, and he'll go on to live a fairly normal life. I wouldn't be surprised if his probation period extends past 18, but I don't understand the UK laws enough to even know that. Like, maybe civil fines. He might owe Rockstar millions of dollars that he'll never pay, and he might have to go bankrupt, and maybe his parents will have to go bankrupt, more than likely. But I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't spend any time in jail at all, or maybe a year or two until he's 18. They might try him like an adult, and that might change things, certainly. But at a certain point, we have to be realistic here and truthful. And the problem here isn't that a hacker could socially engineer Uber and Rockstar and get into a VPN part of the network. The problem here is that these billion-dollar companies literally have not trained their employees and have not implemented enough security. If we're going to say buyer beware, at a certain point, we also need to say corporations beware. They have to protect their own assets, and if they are going to do criminally small amounts of efforts to protect their own security, then it's their own darn fault at a certain point that they get hacked. I hate to potentially blame the victim, but that's really what it's gotten down to, is we can't let corporations spend millions of dollars lobbying politicians so they can prosecute 17 hackers and then spend $0 on improving the training of their own employees and the security of their own computers. Inherently, while it will be inconvenient, every single file in a corporation needs to be encrypted with something like a probably two-factor style YubiKey, and the people that can access that file will have different encryptions for each of those files. So it won't just be one key unlocks everything. But yeah, everything needs to be encrypted, everything needs to be locked. That just needs to be the default by far. Everything needs to have some kind of challenge type password or something. And at that point, if you socially engineer and can get into the VPN of a place, it won't matter because you won't have the YubiKey, the two-factor authentication key to unencrypt any files. So you might be able to steal encrypted files, but nothing else. And we see that that's obviously the solution for security, at least part of the solution for security, because what are the ransomware encryption attacks? It's the bad guys get into your VPN, they encrypt your files, and then the good guys who can't access their own files and then have to pay a ransom to de-encrypt their own files. So that technology works. It's proven to work by the bad guys. So just take a cue from the bad guys, good guys, and do the same thing. Encrypt your files. And even on an individual stance, you probably should encrypt your files. Moving on, the first Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales PC trailer has been released. I don't know if you specifically really needed a PC trailer. Perhaps this is an indication of where Sony wastes some of their advertisement budget and, frankly, some of their licensing budget, in that they are making a separate trailer just to show off a game that's already been released on the PlayStation, now showing off the PC port. This article from Video Games Chronicles is a little sad to me, I think. Cyberpunk 2077's resurgence, because of the Edge Runners anime, has cleared The Witcher 3's all-time concurrent player records. Although, in all fairness, there was no online component to The Witcher 3 either, so there would be no real reason for people to be playing The Witcher 3 at the exact same time, other than just a general desire for everybody to play The Witcher 3 when it first came out. Again, no online pressure there to actually play The Witcher 3 when it first came out. And as somebody who did play it when it first came out, I saw no benefit from really playing it when it first came out. I could have waited 6 weeks, 6 months. I could have waited till the DLC came out and played the DLC at the same time. If anything, DLC makes a much better argument to not play games when they first come out. Let's see. Let's take a little bit of a break here. I don't know if I'm fully done for the day. We're slowly making progress, but we're running out of time too. But yeah. Let's see. Special XYZ summon monsters. We still have 10 of those, and I probably need to play a different deck. Activate spell cards, I need to do 2 more of those. When in the Duel exhibition, I need to do 1 more of those. And then I would need to synchro summon a bunch, 18 more of those, which arguably means I won't get that done. I have 3 days left to do solo mode. I have 3 days left, so I obviously have missed some days. Yeah, but I think I would prefer to just take a little bit of a break here and focus on the news. Since we're an hour and 30 minutes in, we're at the 85 of 100 as far as the dual pass, and plenty of time, so we'll definitely get the dual pass done. If anything, the inconsistency on how much you have to actually play to get the dual pass done versus how much you actually have to play to get rewards in the solo mode is far too high. Yeah, I personally think this is a shame though, because Cyberpunk 2077 at this point is getting rewarded for bad behavior, in my opinion. Like, they made a bad game, they haven't fixed the game, and now all of a sudden they're getting rewarded just because they let Netflix make an anime, or they let Studio Trigger make an anime. I haven't gotten back to watching Edge Runners, but I probably should. Also, I recognize that there's a character named Lucy and a character named Rebecca, so there are 2 girl characters, and I think in my mind I was assuming it was all just Lucy, because the 2 characters as little animated characters looked close enough together that I didn't really tell a difference, because I wasn't really paying attention. It probably, once I get past having only watched the first episode, will become more obvious. When I watch past the first episode, it probably will become more obvious. Apparently, Certain Affinity has close to 100 people working on a big Halo Infinite project. The studio claims it's working on something big and new for the franchise, which I'm not sure really what big and new means for Halo. Also, I guess Certain Affinity is working on Halo Infinite. I thought 343 was working on Halo Infinite. Maybe 2 teams are working on Halo Infinite, or maybe I've gotten confused here. Like, Bungie definitely is not working on Halo Infinite, because they gave up on the Halo series and moved over to Destiny. At least the company named Bungie did. Who knows how many programmers actually stuck with the new Bungie and didn't eventually move over to 343. But yeah, Certain Affinity, I don't even know the backstory as far as that company. This, I think, is probably bigger news than it seems. The Blaze Blue creator Toshimichi Mori has left the developer Arc System Works. I know this may cause anxiety, especially for Blaze Blue's users. I'm truly sorry for this. We are increasingly seeing a different type of Japanese when it comes to working in businesses, and particularly in the video game business. Like, you have artistic savant creators that are willing to look cool and leave companies, which that's 2 things you definitely didn't see in Japanese businesses before. If this was 30-40 years ago, this guy would be in a full suit and tie. His hair would be short and black and not have highlights of brown, which is definitely highlights. Almost certainly. You wouldn't have cool tinted glasses. You wouldn't have a leather jacket. You wouldn't be looking with an upturned chin like I'm cool. It would be bowing your head and showing reverence, even in a screen in a picture. Now, normally, outside of Japan, working for 2 decades is more than enough, and I can't blame anybody for leaving. But in Japan, you would work in a company until you died. You'd be in your 80s and 90s. This comes after the story that nobody really wants to report on as far as the mainstream video game journalist, which is the redconning, I guess that's the right word. I was about to say dehumanizing, but that's the wrong word. The redconning of Bridget as a character. And noticeably, they are even showing the Bridget announcement. The story for over 20 years in the BlazBlue storyline has been that Bridget was a male twin born in a village where there was a rumor that male twins were unlucky, so Bridget was raised as a girl, effectively cross-dressing as part of a culture, as part of his personality. That for 20 years has been the story. He didn't really care about there's been entire endings and stories that have explained this. He didn't really care if people thought he was a girl. He played around with it as being kind of a trap character in the anime sense, in which people can look at the character and make assumptions that he is female and be tricked or trapped into it. Although very rarely do trap characters actively seek to trick or trap people into like sexual encounters. That is just homophobic fantasies that happen outside of anime and everywhere. That there are a lot of cross-dressers out there that are just trying to trick and trap people, when the exact opposite is very much the case, and you would get gay bashed almost certainly if you tricked somebody into thinking you were a female and then turned out to be a male. Now, for 20 years, that's been the story. Now, SJWs and Arc System Works has listened to those SJWs, or are part of the group of SJWs, have said, we don't like the phrase trap. They've directly said that. They don't like the concept of a trap. They don't like the concept of somebody cross-dressing in general. And they have tried to push their narrative and their agenda, which is that all cross-dressers are transgendered. There's a big difference there. There are people that like to dress in what would be that society's opposite gender clothing, whether they like to do it for their own personal reasons or whether they like to do it for sexual reasons. And at a certain point, that's what I would call transsexual, is somebody who is cross-dressing for sexual reasons, like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But pretty much they hate the transsexual phrase also, and don't use that anymore. But SJWs are saying, have tried to push the idea that just doesn't exist. Anybody who cross-dresses actually feels like that gender, actually wants to be that gender, actually should be treated for transgendered mental conditions and transitioned medically, if possible, to that gender. Although, even in that, I said treated for that medical conditions, and a lot of SJWs also don't want transgendered people to have to admit that they have a medical disorder at all. They want to say that transgenderism is normal, when the number of people with transgenderism really just doesn't possibly support that. It has to be a medical condition that is treated by transitioning for anybody in society to actually agree with it. And I'm getting into a long rant here about a topic that gets brought up far too often in video games and that I don't even care about, because at the end of the day, this is another example, like I was talking about before, of a fictional character being a cross-dresser. It has nothing to do with reality, and it's not a representation thing, because you're stealing the identity of this character in the same way that transgender people often feel their identities are stolen by saying somebody is transgendered when they aren't. And that's effectively what Arc System Works forced Toshimichi Mori to say, I believe, or maybe it wasn't Tasamichi Mori that said it, but certainly somebody who created the characters was forced by Arc System Works to come out and confirm what the Western developers were saying. And it has created this big controversy in Japan in particular, where I imagine Guilty Gear is a lot more popular, and a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration for a really stupid reason. So, yeah, it's dumb. No matter which way you look at it, it's a dumb thing to fight about a virtual character. It's a dumb narrative to try and push for no reason. It's a dumb thing that some voice actor originally voiced, is my understanding of how this all started, is that the voice actor said they were transgendered, and instead of the Japanese company going, technically no, we have a long history of her being just a cross-dresser, but we understand the confusion, the Japanese company says, nope, we just have to support what the voice actor says. So then they continue to push this narrative over and over again. People effectively reshaping reality based on their own agendas. And there definitely aren't enough there definitely aren't enough people out there in the industries telling them to stop pushing these narratives, because it doesn't look good. Like I literally just had to go onto a rant about Blaze Blue, and someone has literally quit their job over this, and almost certainly this is over this. He's either quit because of the controversy or the pushback or for the original thing. I may be totally wrong on which side he's on too. I assume he's on the side of what was canonically the story, because canonically it's a more interesting story to say that there was a culture where characters cross-dress. There are cultures out there where characters cross-dress or wear different clothing based on different society norms. Like, it's not crazy to effectively say that the Japanese, before they started wearing Western clothings, the men were wearing kimonos and dresses as much as the women wore, and so there was just no gendered difference there between wearing kimonos. There are definitely some African countries where the men wear skirts, and Scottish kilts effectively are skirts. And it is not uncommon in African countries where the risk of being raped is fairly high if you're a female to try and dress as a male when you can get away with cross-dressing for protective reasons. But yeah, that is a way more interesting story than to say we don't know what the story is for the past 20 years of Guilty Gear stories, because all of that canonical history has been erased, and now we're getting this new story that Bridget is just transgendered, and we have to start over again as that character that is effectively a different character from the one you've been playing as for 20 years. And certainly, if the opposite was done, people would be up in arms. If Bridget, as a crossdresser, had been changed to a female this whole time, retconned, and just say Bridget has always been a female, it was just a rumor that Bridget was a male, it's never been true, that would be something people would be upset about also. Moving on. Like, yeah, I didn't realize I was going to end up in another rant. Netflix reveals its first look on an Onimusha anime. No release date has been given for the show. This almost certainly is part of the just flood on Steam of trailers, although I didn't even see this one. As for an anime, I mean, you're only seeing a few screenshots. It looks fine. One of the things I will say is that the Edge Runners, Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime and Studio Trigger, it's it's doing its own kind of animation style that stands out. So it definitely isn't going for more of a samurai hard-edged animation that you would see a few of these each season, maybe 2 or 3, and it definitely isn't going for the cutesy, highly colorful animation style that is the vast majority of animated series. And at a certain level, anime just means animation in Japanese, so it's not surprising that there are different color palettes and art styles used, although the art styles tend to stay within a few categories and the color palettes tend to be fairly similar. But anime in general has a high level of polish to it and a subset of categories of art styles. So you can usually tell when something is animated by a Japanese animator compared to even a Chinese animator and a Korean animator. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the UK police confirmed they've charged the teenager with the breach. It'd be funny if it turns out that this teenager was innocent, and we have to assume innocent until proven guilty, which, yeah, that's something I should have said earlier. But yeah, we probably won't hear anything about this story for a long time. Once somebody's been charged, they're either going to probably be thrown in prison or released on bail or bond, unless the UK system is different than that. And then I imagine the courts will be clogged up in the UK as much as they are in the US, so it could be months, if not years, until they get a day in court. One of the problems, particularly in the US court system, which I can speak to with more experience, is that the idea of bails and bonds is a way of forcing people to admit guilt when they're not guilty and gaining giving extra punishment to poor people in an unfair justice system. Inherently, people should either be held in jail if they are actual flight risks and actually dangerous, and everybody else should be released on no bails and no bonds at all, or just everybody should be held in jail, and then the jail should be always overflowing with people who haven't even been convicted, to the point where they're releasing people and just giving up on prosecuting people. The court system really should be prosecuting a much smaller percentage of people than they actually are, because, otherwise you do create this overflow system that is intentional. It's part of the system, and then rich people, of course, just bail and bond out, and that seems unfair. If they made bails and bonds based on your annual income or something, then that might be a little bit more fair, but still not really. Being able to pay any amount of money to get out of jail when you should be in jail is wrong, and it's a flaw in the judicial system. If you should be in jail, you should be in jail, period. If you shouldn't be in jail, you should be out of jail. It's just that simple. Moving on, the Judgment PC mod has been made to restore the actor following a drug arrest. The actor only appeared in the Japanese release of the game at launch. So, yeah, I don't know if this actor was the actual main character. I don't think he was, but this definitely was a big controversy, and they modded him completely out of the game because he was arrested with cocaine. People in Japan, rich people in Japan, do occasionally do drugs, but I don't think as much as probably people in Hollywood. But there is a much higher level of hypocrisy as far as the way the news will report it and the way people will act publicly against anybody who is caught with drugs in Japan. So it effectively ruined his career, and got him erased from this game, and he probably will never work again by being caught with drugs. Whereas I would argue the better response there is probably for him to come out and say, oh, I have a problem, I need to go to rehab, and just do that dance that we see over and over again. People with drug addictions definitely do have a problem. It's not untrue, but also celebrities say they have a problem and then go to rehab and then get caught with drugs again because they had no intention of getting better. Although it is also pretty much impossible to get better on drugs. Like recidivism, as it were, relapsing, is very high on anybody with any kind of addiction or addictive personality, particularly when you're taking chemicals that your brain becomes dependent on. Moving on, a Sony exec reiterates that PlayStation believes its premium releases first and then PlayStation Plus later. So there's no plans, once again, they've confirmed, to give you the premium AAA games on PlayStation Plus day one of their launch, which definitely makes PlayStation Plus a worse experience than Xbox Game Pass, where a lot of premium games, I don't think all of them, but a lot of them are day one free with the Xbox Game Pass. A Pokemon art experience is coming to Manchester next month, which this is Video Games Chronicles, so that Manchester, UK. So that's not very useful information for most people. A YouTuber has gotten their hands on a PlayStation 5 development kit, offering an in-depth look. You can see a very different looking device compared to what the PlayStation looked like. And in all fairness, this is not a terrible design, although it looks weird to have so much extra vents. But yeah. We've seen other development kits that are somewhat similar to this, and they can be intriguing, certainly. These aren't development kits, these are teardowns of different builds of the PlayStation 5 in its final form. Noticeably, what getting a development kit doesn't seem to really do for you, though, is get you very close to emulating PlayStation 5 games or removing security around PlayStation 5 games. I doubt that there is a encryption key on some kind of chip here that you could try and read off that would then lead to you to like a master key that would decrypt all all PlayStation 5 video games, because I imagine in the development kit none of the software is encrypted in the first place, so this would let you potentially play unencrypted development builds of games, but in the final product it almost certainly forces you to have an encryption key that is unique to at least your company, if not that specific game, and a collection of key pairs that are downloaded from the internet onto the PlayStation 5. We seem to not be able to go even a couple of weeks without getting some new talk of Silent Hill. A new Silent Hill game has been rated in South Korea. The rating follows over a year of reports that Konami is planning to revive the series. The game was called Silent Hill: The Short Message. I wouldn't be surprised if it is some kind of like smartphone thing or just a really small game that's only a few hours long, and I wouldn't be surprised if it really has nothing that feels like it actually is connected to the old Silent Hill series and is just an attempt to reboot the series or make a new series under the same name. But yeah, we are at this point, we've seen at least one, maybe two speculative Silent Hill games, one of which at least was made by Bloober Team, with no confirmation that it actually was ever going to be made or agreed upon by Konami. We've seen an announcement for 2 Silent Hill games now, and there's just been a lot of speculation around a lot of potential other Silent Hill content that may be in those 2 or 3 games. I wouldn't be surprised if there really is only 2 Silent Hill games actively in development and 1 speculative game that they speculated on and probably aren't working on anymore. Moving on, Atlus is suing fans who resurrected its long-closed Shin Megami Tensei MMO. The company claims that the fan servers have caused it irreparable damage, is the quote here. You typically don't see a case of Japanese companies suing their own fans, and you're always in a bad position when you're suing your own fans. But yeah, this is not good for Atlus, and this almost certainly is Atlus of Japan. Here is an update. They declined to comment, and Video Games Chronicles actually asked him to comment. Yeah, there's rabid fandom around the Shin Megami Tensei series and its spin-offs like Persona, and there's not enough support there, really. Like, really, if the fan base was high enough that you could have fan servers for an MMO, you should have let the fan servers exist to get good press, because now you're getting bad press, and you never want to be in a position where you're actively attacking your fans, and that's what they're doing. I would also say the Atlus series and the Shin Megami series in particular is just so long, at both each individual game taking way too long to play, but also just too many sequels and too many spin-off games, that I don't think I really want to play any of the Shin Megami Tensei games at this point. Like, there's maybe one I kind of thought maybe I'd play in the most recent Shin Megami Tensei game in the main series, but I don't think I would want to do that. And that's a shame, because Atlus has some other games that are very much fan favorites. Atlus pretty much only succeeds on the fact that it has a bunch of fan favorite games, and yet either the Japanese version, the Japanese side, or the American side of Atlus has often shot themselves in the foot with just not treating their fandom well. And in all fairness, when you have a rabid niche fandom like Atlus does, you really do have to kind of bend over backwards to accommodate them, because they will turn on you, and you won't get other fans to replace the people that do turn on you. So you lose some ownership of your properties at some point when you have a niche fandom, whereas if Halo gets rid of multiplayer, there's still probably enough people that would still buy Halo, where Microsoft doesn't care. Let's see. Moving on, FIFA 23 New Zealand release time, how to unlock the full game early on Video Games Chronicles, if you want to check that out. Let's see. EA's Koei Tecmo hunting game is called Wild Hearts. The debut trailer will be published this week. This, I assume, might be an attempt at making a Monster Hunter type game, although why in the world would you trust EA, even if it's under a subsidiary of Koei Tecmo? I didn't even know EA owned Koei Tecmo, come to think of it. But yeah, I think, and also Rand to the Monster Hunter series is probably not going to succeed when you have EA as your parent company that's going to try and put a bunch of microtransactions in it and really ruin the experience. I wouldn't be surprised if Wild Hearts comes out and it is one of the next big major failures of games that they put a lot of effort into and nobody wants to play. E3 2023 reveals a revamped consumer business format and dates. This is the Red Pop Run show, so it's no longer the old people that were running E3. It is now the company that runs the Penny Arcade Expo events. You'll see a split between separate business and consumer events, split between 4 days in Japan. So That'll be interesting, but that's probably the smarter move. At least to dip your toe in the water and try and figure out how it is best to run E3. Because the business people don't want the consumers there at all, um, except for the companies that are actually showing games. Do want consumers there, but they kind of don't want them in the way when they're trying to do business. So you end up having to run two parallel events in the past, and that didn't, I think, work particularly well. Yeah, like the idea of having consumers at E3 really only went for a few years, and it never really seemed to solidify as a smart idea. FIFA 23 PS5 EA Play trial is live early. How to start playing it now. This again doesn't really feel as much like an article as it does just as clickbait. Netflix announced an in-house game studio in Helsinki. They also showed off one of the games that has already come out on PC, and I forget the name of it, but it's coming to Netflix on the mobile app at least. I don't know if it actually is going to be playable through like apps on the phone. I think Netflix is probably leaning towards abandoning interactive movies and games in the app and instead just having you install games on cell phones outside of Netflix's main app. But I can't remember the name of the game. It was a kind of a point-and-click walkthrough game where there was a little bit of puzzling and a little bit of story. And there was this radio that you tuned, but it wasn't a particularly good game. I covered it on my channel, and I really didn't like it. And the Oxenfree is the name of it. Yeah, now that I think of it. And Oxenfree 2 has been delayed also, so the sequel to it. Although I don't think I'd particularly try to play Oxenfree 2 anyways. They have a first trailer of The Last of Us on HBO. And so I guess this is Joel, and I guess this is whatever the girl's name is. I don't know if there's really a reason to even watch the trailer. It doesn't seem like it wants to really play anyways. As somebody who hasn't actually played The Last of Us, I'm assuming that I'd have to make a lot of assumptions all over the place. Like, and in a lot of ways, it's gonna win or lose based on what the monsters look like and how much you interact with the monsters, because in the game, that is pretty much the main story. What I'm seeing in this trailer is a lot more dealing with people and interactions and dealing with the events kind of at the beginning of the game. So they're kind of doing the Walking Dead thing where the zombies don't matter and it's more about people. I'm seeing just like a ton of people here that I wouldn't really expect to see for a Last of Us. Just the phrase, The Last of Us. And so you just get that quick flash of the monsters. And yeah, I can say neither of those characters look like the characters in the movie, in the video game. But what is that super shocking? Were they going to do digital, like, refacing so that the characters look like this? It would really suck if they changed the game once again so that the actors' faces were put on the characters in The Last of Us Remaster. That would be stupid, but I wouldn't put it past them to do that. But yeah, there's a potential here that you're going to get something like The Walking Dead, where it's going to be a lot more talking than you'd expect, a lot more human interaction than you'd expect, a lot less of seeing the monsters, a lot less of any of the gameplay mechanics or even the general story narratives that would have seen in Last of Us 1 and Last of Us 2. I don't know how much the fans even want any part of Last of Us 2 to be in the TV show. I wouldn't be surprised if the TV show goes in a completely different direction and just tries to continue and have multiple seasons. But yeah, I guess fingers crossed is about the only thing you can say. You hope the TV series goes well just out of kindness, I'd imagine, but it's not going to really affect the game in any way, one way or the other. I seriously doubt we'll see a Last of Us 3. If we do see a Last of Us 3, it'd be very weird and probably have a different characters completely, which maybe the sequel should have done that. You're also going to potentially have the Resident Evil Netflix series problem, where there really weren't any major emphasis on zombies in the Resident Evil series, and while there was an occasional Easter egg to the Resident Evil video game series, the Netflix Resident Evil live action series was absolute garbage and not really anything that felt like Resident Evil. I wouldn't be surprised if The Last of Us does not feel like Last of Us to most of the people who played the game. You run a big risk on making a TV show based on something that really emotionally impacted people, whereas you might do better finding a game that basically nobody played and turning that into a TV series, or putting out the TV series first and then making a video game based on that. I could see a Stranger Things video game covering the entirety of the series and that working fairly well, although it almost certainly would be like a Telltale experience that's mostly cinematic even then. Let's see. So I talked about this earlier. They've made this new Amazon Prime sales event, has been announced for October. 2 days Prime early access sale promises hundreds of thousands of deals between October and 12th. I feel like there's a decent chance that this is going to be on top of a sale around Black Friday. But also, this is almost certainly around the idea of the CEO of Amazon.com wanted an early sale of early Prime sale a couple years ago because he was stepping down as CEO or something. I don't know if he's actually the CEO anymore as far as Jeff Bezos, because he was going through a divorce, and in part because he was going on a rocket into space, and they didn't want the rocket to explode and kill the CEO of Amazon.com. That was bad, too high of a risk, and probably against his contract as CEO. So he forced, and this is my speculation, but almost certainly I would guess this is true, he forced an early Prime Day sale like 4 or 5 months early, and now this is probably them trying to reset things and say, yeah, we want our Black Friday sale to actually be around Black Friday. Now, October 11th is definitely not near Black Friday, which would be November 25th or so, around November 25th. But getting a month early for holiday Christmas shopping makes way more sense than buying 4 or 5 months early. Plus, the Prime Day sale this year and last year, and pretty much always, has not been the best of sales. You're much better throughout the year just looking at slickdeals.net and buying things when you need it throughout the entirety of the year. The Prime Day is kind of a great excuse to just buy things that will never go on sale, which there's a lot of stuff like that where the prices are fixed and they never move. But you should definitely check anything on Amazon with something like camel.com to see if there is a history of the prices moving. And typically we will see prices go up right before a sale, and then the prices go back down to what they normally are, and then they'll claim that's a sale. But yeah, I could probably buy some garden hoses and things like that, just normal things, during this Prime Day sale, but I may very well not try to buy much of anything. Generally, I don't expect there to be much of a great deal as far as anything. Maybe some Amazon Prime Kindles and things might be discounted to their normal sales prices. And then our last Video Games Chronicle article for the day says a mineral camo Xbox Series X and S controller has been leaked. Which mineral camo, it looks just black to me. So yeah, I don't know if that is literally just a different color and that's it. That seems to be pretty much. So we'll probably see a new color, but you would probably be better off getting the Elite cheaper series, because the Elite cheaper series that they announced a couple months ago really isn't that much more expensive than just buying a regular controller for actual physical differences and improvements. Although I never really did get to find out whether you can buy the accessories for the expensive Elite Series 1 and add them to the Elite Series 2, like the flappy paddles on the back or the replaceable height heads on the control stick. Because if the Elite Series 2 doesn't allow you to change those things, then it really isn't an Elite Series at that point. What I think I want to do is I want to go through some of the games that have come out on Steam for a while here, just to keep it interesting. Here we can see Call of Duty Modern Warfare Open Beta is happening, and you are getting fairly mixed results, around 67%. So people are not super enthusiastic about it, particularly when you consider that this would be your highest level of fans possible. I need to do a YouTube short on this, I guess, just because this is a unique, big enough game to have that level of relevancy, but things do not spell well for Modern Warfare 2 as it is. And this is a lot of people, so you can't really claim that this is just like an active hate campaign or anything like that. The actual fandom, people that would actually play the game and buy the game, are not happy. And to play the open beta, I imagine you maybe have to pre-purchase the game. First review here, racial and homophobic slurs just like the old days. Yep. I definitely have to say I've never really experienced online play that much, so I don't know how much of that is really true and how much of that is just memeing. That review definitely feels like a meme and a joke, certainly, but yeah, I do expect any game like that to, when you get online, to have people saying nasty things to other people as they're trying to bait the characters and irritate the other characters into losing. I had to very quickly change off. We're still looking at adult content here. Here we have a game on Steam called Hard Rock Sex 3D, and it is a Guitar Hero game with 3D models of people doing hardcore sex in the background, I assume during the events. It does seem to have some dialogue and visual novel stuff occasionally too, but noticeably it's put all of the rhythm elements on one side of the screen, almost like there would be a two-player mode to it. There might even be a mini game in which you're actually having sex or moving to the rhythm of it. It's not a terrible thought for an adult game, really. In fact, it's rated very positively at 86% positive at 37. Lots of people do have sex to the rhythm of music. It's a good strategy. So making a rhythm game around sex makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, this puts me in a weird position because by most rules, I would put this game on my fall list. But I have to be realistic here. I don't really want an adult game on my fall list, so when I do the fall list cleanup, I am potentially showing off or flashing nudity again on the screen. And B, I'd probably never buy this game, even though it doesn't look as bad as most adult games. And yeah, so I think I just have to say no there. But I would say, of all the adult games I've seen so far in the past couple of weeks of looking at the adult games, Hard Rock Sex 3D seems to do it fairly nicely, if that's what you're looking for. And then, notably, we have here another game that's adult content right after it called VR Porn Hentai Teacher, which that's just a mesh of keywords in the name. That being said, it is 3D models of women, and it does look like it might actually be in VR, which there might be something around that. But yeah, it's just 3D models of Western women. There's nothing here really that I would say falls under the category of what a Westerner would call the hentai. There's one woman that's kind of in colorful outfits, and that's about it. There's one girl here that has just like a whole bunch of freckles all over her face. Physics don't look amazingly great, but for VR it might work fairly well. Interestingly, it is also English only, and again, it's 3D models. So then we're finally back to a non-adult game that I can actually show. Yeah, I'm walking a very delicate line, certainly even showing any of this on YouTube. So far so good, but yeah, we shall see. I could almost benefit from getting a 30-day suspension, just not streaming about anything at all for 30 days because you can't live stream, and just then pre-recording footage and I don't know if YouTube even limits the amount of how long of footage you can upload if you have a community guideline strike. It would be terrible for my channel if my channel was big, but it might be great for just my general work schedule to take a 30-day vacation. Not that I'd like to do that. This Groundfall game looks awful. And Project Sundown here doesn't look amazingly great, but I'll give it a follow. A YouTube short. I need to probably raise the level of I probably need to raise the level of quality of the games I make YouTube shorts around. Here we have a game called Haunted Girls that's not in English. It's a Japanese only game. One of the things I also want to do is I want to try some of my other sources to correlate the visual novels that I know have adult content on them and that are coming out compared to the visual novels that are coming out on Steam, because it doesn't really feel like there's a bunch of visual novels that I don't know why I did that. It's not like there's a bunch of visual novels that are getting released, but they're not coming to Steam. It's just they're not getting released. So I'm trying to get deeper and deeper to an understanding of what the true number of visual novel adult games are. And honestly, I've only seen one that was announced in the past week. And it is on Steam, so it may just be that visual novel adult games are a thing of the past, and I'm thinking from an older perspective, and that's why updating your sampling and surveying is important. This game doesn't look like anything, but yeah, what I was saying before is it's a very fine line. Like Honey Pop as a game barely is on the line of an adult game that has enough game content on it that you can actually show it off and say, hey, there actually is a good game on this, and the adult content can be censored and shown on YouTube. Whereas the Guitar Hero adult game, with there just being full-on hardcore sex happening in the background non-stop, that's going to be overly extreme and just too much content. And visual novels also had that. If like 90% of all the visual novels are just dialogue and then there's one scene that can be censored, then that brings it close enough to family friendliness. What's funny is, as I'm watching Archer, like the very first episode of Archer was showing like full nudity uncensored, and by the like second season they're blurring some things out, and I think probably by the time you get to the later seasons of Archer, it totally gets away from the whole raunchy like comedy that it started itself off as, and pivots into just being more of a drama comedy. But yeah, that first season of Archer, like every joke is pretty much a sex joke. Let's see, football on a football foot pool on a football field, I guess is the question. The green on green is a mistake here, and the graphics here are just not quite polished enough. So, say no to that. Say no to that. Let's start going through some of the Gamatsu articles now, since we've gone through some of the games now. An adventure game called Shanghai Summer was announced for PC. We had already talked about that one. Miles Morales for PC teaser trailer. We had already talked about that. Evo Tinction Story Trailer 1, The Red Virus, is available to watch as a trailer on Gamatsu. I kind of want to get a general idea. This is some kind of action adventure stealth game. I don't recognize this game. My network has been working almost perfectly since I adjusted settings, but then it did weirdly reboot. Like my router just weirdly rebooted in the middle of Sunday night, and I don't know what happened there. But after it rebooted, everything was fine. Yeah, and so far I'm still not seeing any pausing or loading or lagging issues as far as streaming stuff. Which really just gives me an excuse to change some settings and see if everything is actually perfect. Yeah, not a lot here as far as this trailer. It's just flashing the black and flashing the black. It does look like it is some kind of stealth game, and that's all they're really willing to say at this point. Let's see, a game called Atri My Dearest Moments has had a TV anime being announced. The A here is totally missing. Aniplex.exe visual novel gets an anime adaptation. Aniplex.exe. It's not a brand I'd ever even heard of. So this is a game on Steam, so we should check it out. So at a certain level, visual novels are still a big thing. Or at least they were a big thing. Scroll down here and see if there's any mention of adult content before we look at the trailers, because yeah, I don't know. So this came out in June 18th of 2020, and there's an Aniplex.exe. And you can see here is a girl in what looks kind of like a sailor suit outfit, but kind of isn't either. She seems to be wet, which has turned this dress that buttons up in the front kind of transparent in some areas. Yeah, but this really isn't how any school uniform actually would be in Japan. I've never seen a school uniform that didn't have a separate skirt. Uh, but yeah, here you have the flat 2D anime moe style, as it were. Characters a little bit shorter, arms a little bit shorter, tends to make them look a little bit younger as a character, but definitely this is a romance story, and apparently this guy has a metal leg. That was a thing certainly amongst anime for a brief time there, is that they started to have characters that had more disabilities, being in wheelchairs and things like that, being deaf, whereas characters like that were just pretty much never shown before. Here you have a different school outfit. Of course, there's no adult content here, so this was allowed on Steam, and doesn't seem like there's any DLC to patch it. So if there was an adult content patch, it's not actually in the game. Yeah, this game is overwhelmingly positive. It has the Japanese full audio, which that I'm sure helps it also become successful. In the last 30 days, amongst 207 user reviews, it is 99% positive. That is ridiculously high. And over the lifetime since June 18th, 2020, it is at 98% positive, 7,870 user reviews. This is very possibly the best reviewed game on Steam ever. And you kind of just have to assume that the 2% that are putting negative reviews are either idiots and clicked the wrong button or being joking. So this really is a high level of a game as far as visual novels that you should say I should cover. Like, if there's ever any visual novel I should cover, it should be this game. And clearly it's so well received it's gotten an anime series, which that's not super uncommon. But if anything, it's kind of a great idea. Like, if all TV shows first had to make a visual novel and then had to sell that visual novel very well before they got greenlit to become either a longer novel or a short novel or a short story or an anime series. In Japan, they pretty much skip from visual novel directly to anime series. But yeah, if the Western animation world kind of had that same idea and they said something has to be super popular, like The Last of Us, before it became a TV show, we would potentially have a higher chance of a TV show. Although there is a difference there. Like, The Last of Us being super popular and being turned into an animated show makes way more sense, and I think raises the chances of a Last of Us animated show succeeding way more than The Last of Us being popular as a video game and then it being turned into a live action show. And that's something that the Westerners don't realize, but also can't really accommodate so much, because in all fairness, most Westerners still will not watch anything animated. Like, the newest generation of people probably did grow up watching South Park and Simpsons and things like that, but they're not going to stick with watching animated shows as their only source. Rick and Morty, for instance, came back. I'm not watching TV anymore, so I didn't even realize it. How am I now watching Rick and Morty? I'm watching it 3 weeks delayed on the Adult Swim app on Roku. Like, that's pretty much how I'm choosing to watch it, because I'm trying to move away from having cable TV, because cable TV is really expensive and I'm not watching anything on it. I literally, Rick and Morty, Bar Rescue, maybe Good Eats on the Food Channel, and there aren't even really any new episodes of Bar Rescue or Good Eats coming out at a consistent rate. Everything else you can just get through, like Hulu. What We Do in the Shadows works perfectly fine through Hulu. Most of the shows work perfectly fine on Hulu to give you that extended cable experience. Back to video games, Aniplex.exe announces a visual novel called Hira Hiru for PC, which I wonder if this Aniplex.exe is just straight up a rebranding of a different company, because I don't recognize this Aniplex.exe. In a funny way, .exe is not something that people really should recognize as far as executable programs. If you're launching things from Steam, you're not going to be clicking on a .exe file. And you just have this character, I can't even tell if that's a female or male, crying. As far as a visual novel, that's an odd teaser, to say the least. Let's see, Nier Automata version 1.1a TV anime is going to begin airing in January of 2023, and they've got a 2B and a 9S teaser trailer. This is an interesting thought because at a certain level, for a lot of people, they probably don't want to grind through Nier Automata. I probably should play Nier Automata, come to think of it. That would be a great comparison to Darksiders 3. But yeah, if you're going to get a good story, maybe not every single different ending available in the Nier series, by just watching Nier Automata anime series, then a lot of more fans may be created or may be able to really experience the main narrative and the main story without having to grind through the kind of bullet hell-ish button mashing that did kind of exist in the first game. And as far as animation goes, you've run a great trick here in which all the characters are blindfolded so you don't have to draw eyes. That was something that was very weird about the Darksiders 3 series, is that all the demons characters just had glowing white eyes with no pupils, including the character you're playing as, Fury. So it felt fairly odd and off-putting for them not to have pupils. Moving on, Gamatsu says Frontwing has announced a visual novel called Ginka for PC, due out in 2023. Anime girl on the top of a Japanese gate, a demon gate. So she might be a demon of that part, or part demon. At least that would be my guess. A 3D shoot-'em-up called Angelin Trigger has been announced for Switch, or Angelin Trigger. I doubt I'm particularly interested in the shoot-'em-up game, but they're going to try really hard to get you interested. Seems like you're playing with some anime girls of kind of an older 90s, early 2000s style. Some cat girl characters. Random generic male characters. That's how I'd pretty much describe it. And 3D shoot 'em up running towards the game. I don't know if this is particularly the best way to play it. I imagine this is like Space Harrier, is I think the game I'm thinking of. Where you run in a 3D. And Space Harrier was amazing when it first came out 30 years ago, but it really hasn't been copied very much. Here's that article I mentioned before. Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals has been delayed to 2023. And here's basically Oxenfree 2 screenshot. And that's pretty much as I want to say about Oxenfree 2. We already talked about the Blaze Blue series creator leaving Arc System Works. What's funny is they say he departs it after 19 years, whereas Video Game Chronicles said he departed it after 20 years. And that's a hardcore fact. That's easy to figure out and get right. Let's see. I cherished many of my experience I had during my 20 years there, whether it was working with the various fighting game titles, developing my own title BlazBlue, or connecting with many of the users. So in the quote himself, he is saying 20 years. So them getting it wrong and by 19 years seems very wrong, unless he got it wrong and he was just speaking generally, which at a certain point there should be an editor's note, like there should be an editor's note somewhere here that says note, he says in his quote that he worked there 20 years. We've confirmed he started at this date and has actually worked there for 19 years. And that's where the value of actual journalism comes in, is when somebody is talking off the cuff or speaking in general and they say, I've been working here 20 years and it's been actually 19 years. That's where journalists need to exist, or should exist, but they have to actually do their job and not just repeat everything everybody says as truth. We already talked about the Onimusha anime, so we don't need to cover that again. Speaking of Guilty Gear XRD, or XRD Revision 2 for PC is going to add rollback code. The public test begins in late October. I find it very weird that anybody is actually adding rollback code to an existing game when it feels like it would be much smarter just to promise it in the next game at launch. But at least one game, if not two or three, have promised to add rollback code. And maybe that is just because there's a big enough fandom here. I never really did get anywhere as far as thinking about playing fighting games, but at this point I can't imagine Guilty Gear is going to be high on the priorities. I might play one Guilty Gear game, but I'm not going to try and play a bunch of them or play them for very long. DNF Duel bug patch due in late September and a balance patch in late December. So there's a different fighting game from still the same Arc System Works publisher. This week's Japanese game releases, let's see. We have Bayonetta for the Switch, which doesn't make any sense at all. That the first Bayonetta just now is being released physically, I guess. Or has it not even been available digitally? That would really be weird. Make more sense if that was Bayonetta 3 coming out. Bullet Soul Double Pack, FIFA 23, FIFA 23 Legacy Edition for the Switch, Labyrinthus and Getsu, Lamp Campanella della Eterno, I don't know what that is, Legend of Heroes Kira no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sin, Little Witch Nobita, and New Prince of Tennis Let's Go Daily Life for the Switch, Sword Art Online Alicization Lacrosse for the Switch. A lot of these are Switch games of older games. At a certain point, it does seem like that is a very long list of physical and digital releases, and we have a fairly long, fairly average list as far as digital only releases of games. It definitely seems like we're going to hit a point where these two lists just start getting merged, but they do mean different things. And at a certain point, there might be a game that literally only released on physical and doesn't have a digital version, because I kind of suspect that's the case, is that at least one game every now and then comes out and just doesn't have a digital digital version. Notably, the pixels they choose are the Square Enix Valkyrie Elysium, and this is the Legend of Heroes Kira no Kisukai Crimson Sin, I suspect. Let's see, Silent Hill, the short message rated in Korean. That's pretty much all we have is this one line of text. And that's all we know. The point-and-click adventure game Dropsy is coming to the Switch on September 29th, which, that's a little weird. I guess that gives me an excuse, potentially, to play Dropsy. But I couldn't get any footage out by the time Dropsy actually came out. Dropsy is a very weird point-and-click adventure game. And, yeah, I could see just playing it just because, but yeah, my footage would not get out anywhere close in time, so there's not any real pressure to play it. Electronic Arts and Omega Force hunting game is titled Wild Hearts. Reveal trailer set for September 28th. We already talked about that. EA E3, I don't really care enough to get into the details of that. It'll be intriguing to see how E3 actually plays out. I have to say though, I just heard of somebody who was old, certainly dying of COVID, just yesterday. So, while the general pandemic status is gone in the minds of most people, scientists may disagree on that point too, it definitely is affecting people, at least older people, and it definitely is still a thing, which it kind of shocked me personally. I thought that they had figured out how once somebody had gotten into a hospital with COVID, if they needed to even be hospitalized, that they could be saved, but that is not the case in the story I heard yesterday, and they were hospitalized. I don't know if they were ever vaccinated, so maybe that's the real problem there. But yeah, that certainly brings it back into my mind as a slight concern, whereas I've let myself not be as concerned. I was 100% concerned when it first came out, but I slowly realized that I'm particularly too much of a germaphobe and don't run into enough people to actually be exposed to it. I wouldn't be surprised if I've never been exposed to COVID in any form. Moving on, since that has nothing to do with video games, the roguelike turn-based RPG game Sea Horizon is coming to the Switch on October 20th, and PS5, PS4, Xbox One, and Xbox Series in early 2023. Which, I don't know if there's really a game here that is going to look interesting. It looks like a Darkest Dungeon game, which that's another game I probably need to get around to playing. Like, at this point, if I just play Darkest Dungeon, it gives me an excuse to say I'm never going to play another Darkest Dungeon spin-off game, because there are just so many of them. To the point where we very potentially are going to start to see the Darkest Dungeon style of experience just be a standard style of game. It's going to be as much like a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter or a card game. It's just going to be its own category of card-based dungeon crawling, or whatever they find a good name for it. Because yeah, it does seem like it's got enough sticking power to actually stay around. The life simulation game Sword and Fairy Inn 2 is coming to the Switch in late 2022, and everything else as far as consoles in 2023. We're probably going to see more of these types of announcements also, where games just say we're coming eventually to the other consoles in 2023. Probably because it's all coming from the same publisher. The Bridge Curse Road to Salvation is coming to all the consoles in the first half of 2023, and this is more of a horror game. No trailer for that either. And then our last Gematsu article for today is Jun Yon Sword 7 is coming to the Switch in 2023. Which I don't know if that's actually going to come to the West or not. Alright, so we already talked about this one and this one. So now a horse racing game like Pocket Stables, even though this is almost certainly a mobile game being ported, is an interesting thought. I don't know how many people actually care about horse racing or even condone horse racing. I wouldn't be surprised if people are very upset with horse racing, or horse fans are probably upset with force breeding and forcing horses to be just runners and incapable of doing anything else because they've been genetically bred just for speed and not any kind of stability or durability. But ignoring all of that, this is kind of a niche game. This is pretty much the first time I've seen a horse racing game that even starts to look like it might be good. It's single player only, it doesn't have microtransactions in it, so I think deserves a follow for that, and a YouTube short just for being a little bit different. Of course, Pocket Arcade story, I guess, might fall under the same categories, and this may be the exact same developer and publisher. Let's see. It says Carosoft here. If I go back one, it is Carosoft. So they're putting 2 games out at the same time. Speed Break Hyperdrive. It looks like it's an infinite runner. Kind of almost like a Sonic game without the Sonic part. Which, that's an interesting thought, certainly. Could somebody make a Sonic game and it actually be good? I'd say the graphics here look a little rough, but yeah, I'm willing to give this a follow and see if people like it. I don't know if it needs to be a YouTube short. Outcore Desktop Adventure. It says it's an emotional RPG game. It looks like it's a collection of mini games and an anime girl visual novel. It's free, and then it's got like a DLC that's not applicable that's free, and then a supporter pack for $15.99. Yeah, I'll give it a follow. But does it deserve a short? I'd say no. Visually, this doesn't look good as a short, and I may be getting shallow in that, but as I have noticed that the YouTube shorts seem to just randomly change in their numbers of views, I have to assume it's because some of the games just don't look that interesting and people aren't clicking on them. So a game like Planet Baron Objective here, even if it was a game I wanted to play, which it isn't, I'd have to say no to doing a YouTube short on it because it's just not going to be visually appealing. Timeline Walker Dark World. I don't think I want to play this. We have about 40 games to go through, so I need to burn through them fairly quickly. We are increasingly following down this path of longer streams again. I'm going to give this a follow as a choose your own adventure visual novel, but once again, no short. Blaster. I still need to find a better, faster way towards I'm going to put this on the follow because I think this is potentially an old game that people make fun of, Kids on Site Hard Hat Edition, or something maybe kids actually played when they were kids. Adults remember when playing as their kids. But again, I'm not going to give that a short. But yeah, I need to figure out a better system as far as making the YouTube shorts. This is very pretty, but it kind of feels like it's literally just a jigsaw puzzle game. So for my own interest, I'm going to kind of make an exception and give this a short. And see, Alice in Wonderland has been animated many different ways by many different people while still staying generally with the characters as they're described in the books for the most part. But just making a jigsaw puzzle, even if it looks pretty visually attractive, is not really a game that should be purchased. There's actually a shockingly small number of Alice in Wonderland games on Steam worth playing. There's a Disney Alice in Wonderland game that I played, but it wasn't amazingly good. I don't even remember if it was good or not. It's been so long. So I'll just take that back. Could have been great and I just forgot about it. The Spirit and the Mouse. This was a game that we saw a teaser for. It's not a VR game, is it? Nope. So we'll give that a follow in a YouTube short. Mouse runs into an electricity spirit and then uses his powers to transition from point A to point B. It can be a game there that's good. That doesn't look like anything. The Matriarch. I guess the idea is to find the real players while there's a bunch of bots playing as nuns. We've seen a lot of these ideas before. And it's a funny twist, certainly visually, on the idea of finding the odd one out. That you have this like satanic star and then drop a thing on a giant upside down cross on her. But I don't think there really is a game here. I mean, it really is just another attempt at doing something like Among Us. Suspicion games apparently is going to be just a consistent theme of suspecting other people. Which, yeah, we had games like Clue for decades, so it's not the first time that there have been betrayal games and suspicion games made. This Terra Invicta is mixed reviewed, which I feel like this is a point where standards could be raised, because I'd almost say in the past that if something was mixed reviewed but has reviews at all, then it probably deserves a YouTube short. But at this point, I think I am leaning more towards the idea of YouTube shorts being fairly curated experiences. It already is a curated experience, but the curation was around things that look like they might be interesting, whereas arguably the curation should be things that look like they'll be good. And there's a big difference there, because there are, in the past, I've done YouTube shorts on games that were already mixed reviewed and controversially reviewed. This Rise of the White Sun, I'd like to keep it on the follow list. But Silent Huntress here. Yeah, it's a different art style. It's basically a visual novel from the looks of it, and it seems like it may only have a couple of things. Noticeably, it says very soon here and coming soon. Also noticeably, I've gone through like several games now and no adult games. So when I open new games that have come out on Steam, the macro starts at the top of the list, which should be the most recent games, and works down on the list, which would imply that the adult games came out on Monday, or were published on Monday, and over the weekend no adult games were allowed, even though other games were allowed. which maybe that is how this boils down to, is that there's like a weekend employee who says no or just delays all adult games, and then there's somebody that comes in on Monday and allows some of the adult games, or if not all of them. Now the Super Knight Rider, the problem here is you've got an anime girl, and that implies, alright, you're gonna see an anime girl in biker leather and see your buttocks, but when you actually look at the game, that could be a man for all I know. It's like, yeah, there's just not a lot of detail there. And so then you ignore that sells point, and you just look at the game outside of that, and it looks like it is basically a low effort kind of asset flip racing game. Yeah, so that definitely should be a no. Blocks of Nature is just a Tetris game. The Chaput Baby. Looks like it's probably just a horror asset flip game, but I'll give it a chance. Yeah, we're still consistently running into problems with horror games looking better and better and better. This next game has one screenshot of nudity at the very end. It's called My Agent is a Futanari, which I think I mispronounce sometimes as Funatari. Futanari is Japanese for hermaphrodite, as it were, or dick girl. There might even be some slight difference there in that there might be a different term known to Japanese if they're a hermaphrodite who has both male and female parts, which sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not. Futanaris are always presented as having breasts and being female in every way, other way, like female facial elements and proportions, female arm and leg proportions. It has nothing to do with being transgendered at that point. It is 100% a fictional idea, for the most part. Like there are a couple of hermaphrodites that actually are born in the world, but for the most part this is a fictional idea. Noticeably, too, if you were hermaphroditic and you were born that way, doctors in the United States and probably other places will just immediately do surgery to make you probably a female, and so they will just straight up castrate a baby right as they're born, and often not even really tell their parents that in indirect terms. The game says it has a futanari and exploitation and dirty language. As far as the mature content, it's English only with no voice acting. It's 66 cents. I guess I should say all of that information. Apparently there is a whole My Blank is a Futanari franchise on Steam. It doesn't look like there's much of a game here, really. It's the same background for almost every screenshot except for one, and it's just one character you're talking to. So as a visual novel, whether or not you actually care about the content in it, it seems to be extremely light, playing on the fetish, playing on the niche. It is weird how many adult content material out there, particularly for video games, heavily play into fetishes and don't try to just go more middle in the road. Like, and I wouldn't even really classify like gay or lesbian as being a niche fetish to even count in this argument. But yeah, there's way more furry content as far as visual novels on Steam than you would expect. There's way more futanari content than you would imagine to see. Um, and maybe that's just because it's fairly easy to censor out the adult scenes in a standard straight guy on girl romance visual novel and just sell it like it didn't have that content. Whereas when your entire theme is that your agent is a futanari, you can't get around that. That's your sales point. Or if your entire content is around furry anthropomorphic animals, you can't censor that out either, because that's all of your animations and all of your characters. But yeah, I would like to see more of a normalization, frankly. Just standard. Let's define standard as just guy on girl, guy on guy, girl on girl. I'd like to see a lot more of those kinds of adult content games on Steam, and to be occasionally surprised by a furry game or a futanari game. And I guess I am pretty surprised on the futanari game, because I haven't seen another futanari game since I started looking at adult content, but I'm not that surprised. And futanari, again, is not really a trap, because futanaris are almost exclusively, yeah, they are exclusively females, like a female body with male genitalia extra. Like that, there is no in Japanese male futanaris. Like that's not even a thought that Japanese creators have, I suppose. And I guess the equivalent of that would be a male that presents as a male and just happens to have only female genitalia, or female genitalia in an extra. Yeah. Moving on. We have a game on Steam here called Force Spring. We have about 5 more games to look at. That was an adult game that was later on released. Here we have a puzzle game called Pixel Chan, anime characters of 3 pictures of anime characters. Very possibly this is bought or stolen art. I honestly have to lean more towards the suspicion now in every game that art might be stolen. This is coming soon, it says. Doesn't look particularly good. And look how pixely that image is. That is just awful. Like, it doesn't even really look that good here. Which again would lean towards the idea of it potentially being stolen art if you can't get higher resolution forms of it. Wind of Life. I'll give it a follow, just to be careful. This is yet another pipe game from this developer. I'll give it a follow too, but not a YouTube short. So I guess if there was one adult game fairly close to the bottom here, then that one adult game was released. I can't help but tinfoil hat suspect though that sometimes the weirder games are getting allowed on Steam specifically to kind of slander people who would want to play adult content games. It's perfectly natural that an adult would want to see adult narratives and adult content in their games, and it's definitely my belief that the fact that movies and TV definitely shy away from adult content in TV and movies is just kind of infantilizing all of society, more than even in the past. Like it was fairly common to write love letters that were just scandalous and filthy 200 years ago and pornographic in their descriptions. It has been fairly common even 20-30 years ago for at least all red-blooded American males to have a penthouse or a Playboy around, and yet we're kind of at this point where society is being infantilized to the point where it's like, nope, you should be watching the Disney movies when you're 35 and out trolling for T for D'ing, out there trolling for dick. um, and it's just not the case. And it's only really the flamboyant, like, gay lifestyle that still embraces what is probably a fairly natural urge. Humans are naturally designed to be always on the lookout for ways to procreate, or at least have fun, and it's just not being represented to people, and people are being told that that's wrong, and that in part also leads to the ridiculous idea of people being addicted to sex because they want to have sex once a week or even once a day, and then there are just frigid women out there that don't want to have sex with their husbands and calling them addicts when there's really no such thing. There are people with obsessive personalities, certainly, that are actually thinking about sex every 7 seconds. Me going through these adult games has me thinking about sex more often than I probably normally would. But yeah, the number of people with actual obsessive personalities is low, and people with obsessive personalities would just shift their obsession to something else, even if they weren't thinking about sex. I'm wondering if at some point here I need to just put a warning at the beginning of these streams too. Adult content warning. Yeah, that may be the new thing to do. Certainly, is find a warning image and putting it right at the beginning. Moving on to the GameDeveloper.com article, so we can wrap up. We're already 3 hours in. I definitely am not getting back to Yu-Gi-Oh at this point. Rockstar Games hacker was possibly identified and arrested by police. I imagine when they say possibly identified to the police, I would kind of hope that they aren't putting out the actual name of people. It's, I suppose, slightly worth pointing it out that if the FBI and U.S. Department of Justice are working on arresting somebody, the UK is going to work alongside them, and pretty much any NATO ally is going to work alongside the United States, plus a whole bunch of other countries are going to work with the United States to arrest people. Bungie files patent for touchscreen controls on mobile and handheld devices, which maybe that is the... nope, Bungie would be Destiny, a mobile Destiny game, not a mobile Halo game. Yeah, I gotta keep that straight in my head. BFI loops video games into funding strategy plans for long-term preservation. The British Film Institute's new 10-year plan is about helping audience recognize the value of screen-based art forms, including video games and extended realities. So, basically, to keep themselves relevant, they now include video games and extended reality, which they probably should have done that 10 or 20 years ago. Netflix has hired the former Zynga Helsinki general manager to lead a new internal game studio. Yep, and this is GameDeveloper.com articles. E3, we already talked about. Slime Rancher 2 has managed to sell 100,000 copies in 6 hours, which that's a big number, but there is also a possibility that you're going to just have a big burst at the beginning and not that big of a burst otherwise. Also, if you were pre-selling any game, pre-ordering any game, then the first hour would have big bumps of any sales of any game. And that tends to be the way things go anyways, is that you want that day one big bump and launch, and then 2-3 days later, by the time you hit the weekend, your sales tend to trickle off and flatten out. And if you can just maintain a nice valley in which you're still getting decent sales, you may get a peak every now and then, but you're going to tend to stay at a valley if you're doing well. You're not going to tend to stay at a plateau at the highest point and never fall down. Apparently, a game developer named Brian Ayers has passed away. He worked with European studios on several game publishers during his life, including Konami and Capcom. Let's see. He was a Sega Europe developer, age 42. He passed away after a, quote, short illness. Let's see. He started working in the game industry in 2008 as a sales executive for Konami. He was promoted to the rank of PR manager in 2010. That's a pretty quick promotion. He served as the publisher's European brand manager until 2014, where he jumped ship to Capcom's brand manager. In 2021, he jumped ship again to Capcom to be a senior product manager at Paradox Interactive. And then at the end of 2021, he worked at Sega Europe for a similar position. So it seems like he jumped all over the place, which maybe means nobody liked him, or maybe he was just a serial jumper. Like, you can't deny that in about 13 years, he went from a fairly entry-level sales executive position, which sales executive probably means he had at least a bachelor's or not, if not master's degree, or PhD, and then he got just promoted. There is baseless speculation I could make saying maybe he got hired at each of these companies and then very quickly was put on some kind of medical leave because he had something like I don't know, Crohn's or something, and so they would like promote him potentially to working jobs that require less actual physical labor. But yeah, that tends not to be the story. If there was something medically or mentally wrong with you, you wouldn't just get promoted and then promoted and promoted. There was also a vocalist at a punk rock band called High Tech Jet, so Crohn's probably wouldn't work in that speculation either. So I imagine he was just really good at getting hired, really good at interviewing, really good at getting promoted, but not particularly good at staying in one place. Which those are very much two different skills that I think very few people have. So you kind of have to work on both skills, selling yourself, presenting yourself well so you can get raises and hired on, and then also dealing with people and maintaining a job. And then GameDeveloper.com also says he worked for nearly 20 years and created the BlazBlue fighting franchise, talking about Toshimichi Mori departing Arc System Works. If anything, this is more of what I would expect as far as a picture of somebody who works in the game industry. There you've got just a kind of standard collared shirt and black hair. So yeah, he definitely at some point took a rock star image and embraced the rock star image. Which yeah, if the creator themselves wants to embrace the rock star image and they have a picture of them in the leather jacket and they want to be shown that way, I can't blame news sources for depicting him that way, the way he wants to be depicted. But it does feel weird that a game developer would be allowed in Japan to even take a picture like that or think that that's the way you should present yourself. But that is the new way of doing things, certainly. Alright, so we've got some fall list cleanup here. This one, Unscared. Yeah, you can pretty much tell that this shouldn't have been on the fall list in the first place, so we can get rid of that. Unsafe, we're still going through the U's. This is mostly positive and it's still early access since November 2021. I guess I'll give it some more time. I do have a slight concern that the fall list may just get shorter and shorter, even though I do feel like I'm dumping a lot of games into the fall list. Unplugged here. I'll give it more time. Probably should just remove it, come to think of it though. Yeah. 100% positive, but only 11 reviews. Came out June of 2021. I'll give it more time. I'll be generous. But yeah, I do have this concern that the fall list may get very short, and then at some point we're not doing any fall list cleanup at all because there's just no need, or we're just going through the same games over and over again. Unmetal here feels like it's a Metal Gear Solid parody game, which at that I will put it on the wish list because it is rated very positively. That being said, I pretty much would only play this game if I was going to play a stealth series of games, if not Metal Gear Solid 5, which that would be about the only thing I could probably play on Steam. There's maybe one other Metal Gear game, 4 or 3, that you can play on PC, but the older PlayStation Metal Gear games were never ported, and I don't see any thought that they really are going to do that. We have a game called Unlock the Cat, which is one of those bus games with a twist on it, and it's very positive, so I'm going to put that on the wish list, and that is hopefully going to stick in my mind that I now have a bus game on my wish list, so I can get rid of some of the worser versions of bus games. Unlife here needs more time. Unknown Woods, I think, is going to leave the fall list. Yeah, it's just not relevant. Relevancy is probably just going to become a bigger and bigger issue. Universe 25 is a point-and-click adventure, so I'm going to give it some more time. Or I could look at the user reviews now and see if... Yeah, if I see 4 positive reviews of the 4 reviews here, I'm going to just make an executive decision and put that on the wish list, because I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games. Unit 404 is a puzzle game. It's barely over the limit of 30, but it's a Sokoban type puzzle platformer. It's a little bit of 2 different things at the same time, because you're moving a little robot while you're spinning boxes around and moving boxes. Yep, but that can go on the wish list also. Let's do a spectate while we're here. And then that gives me enough time here, hopefully, to scroll through my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news to talk about, and then we'll wrap up for today. And I'm starting to get hungry because I only ate like a muffin before I started streaming. Also, I woke up earlier. I mean later. Yeah. Guess there's no reason to talk about that. Apparently, Assassin's Creed Valhalla will add 3 more puzzle-focused tombs on the next update on Tuesday. Which, yeah, it's probably decent content to add, but also is weird to have a game add content after the fact. scrolling down my Twitter feed, trying to see if there's anything else worth mentioning. Yeah, I will say it does feel like we're going to be moving closer to more of a political time of the year. And so I'm going to have to work a little bit harder to not end up talking about elections and politics as I do these streams. Not that I'm particularly interested in elections and politics in the first place. In fact, I'm very uninterested in them. Perhaps to my own mistake. But yeah, these streams already have far too many things I rant about that are directly related to video games. So, for example, me talking about Italy's recent elections in any way, being completely uninformed and not knowing anything would be just a waste, or me talking about Russia in detail is not really video game related. Like I said before, Russia being at war with Ukraine maybe affects the number of Russian troll games on Steam, which we have seen considerably less of those lately. But that's about the only way it connects to video games. Yeah, we have seen quite fewer of those games, and that's not just me filtering out games that don't support the Russian language or don't support English. Because right now I'm looking at every single game that comes out that supports any language except for exclusively Chinese or exclusively Russian, or Russian and Chinese and nothing else, is how it's set up as far as a filter. But most Russian troll games did claim to support English on their descriptions, but most Chinese garbage games didn't. So I imagine if there is a Russian language only game that I miss, it's like one a week, where I'm probably missing 20 to 40 Chinese language only games. Let's hurry this up because I am done on my Twitter feed. There was no new news. And yeah, I definitely need to play more Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters. This is definitely a point where if I had an assistant, I would force that assistant to play Yu-Gi-Oh! As part of their job for me. Come on, finish it up. Either do something here with Raw, the Winged Dragon, or see, he's trying to deck him, which in playback it's not really telling you how many cards are left. 16? Yeah, you're not going to convince him to run out of cards very quickly in 16. Meanwhile, him trying to stop things isn't going to really work, because there's so many like XYZ things that are not going to be affected. He has like 30 cards. He has 8 now. probably a great example of where trying to make a character run out of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not work and would not work. Let's go and claim that. We are getting our gems back up, which is always nice. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and give me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.